All right, Roxana, do you want to start off?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Roxana Jarvis, and I have right next to me Tony Sarah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Monsi, and we are hosting this event as a part of Cal Habitat for Humanity. Thank you all so much for coming. Super excited to have you all. Excited to have the speakers as well as such a great audience. Our event is Justice for Chief, a conversation on wrongful convictions within the criminal legal system.
Yes, and this evening we're going to learn more about Douglas Chief Stankiewicz, a Native American man who's wrongfully convicted of murder. And he has been incarcerated at San Quentin for over 43 years. And through this event, we really hope to raise awareness about the injustice Chief has faced, and also discuss the important topic of wrongful convictions. Throughout the evening, we hope to receive your support in either the form of donations or buying a t-shirt, which Monsi will link those below. The money used will go towards ongoing legal fees, such as ongoing investigations and expert witness testimonies, as well as restarting Chief's life once released from prison. And any support of yours would be greatly appreciated. We're going to start off our event first by showing a short trailer by Dreammaker Studios, a film production company currently documenting and following Chief's case. So Monsi is going to show that real quick.
They did what they needed to in order to make sure that they could pin this murder on Chief. The gun was the most egregious thing they did because they claim that that was the gun that killed her.
We've proved that that gun was in the lead homicide detective's custody 5 years before the murder.
I found the trace report. So there's no doubt, based on their own records, that they had possession of the gun starting in 1973 through the date of the murder.
The Chief's death penalty, that's premeditated murder. That's true murder. Death by firing squad. Death by electrical shock. Death by gas. Death by hanging. All the methods of death penalty that have existed in this country. And now death by virus. Chief. He caught it. He's lucky he didn't die already.
Is bad. You hear people saying the man down, and you hear they died. Even now, like I said, they had the corona in here. It's like, can't do nothing about it. I mean, the fact that I was accused of killing a white person, and I'm being Indian, especially in Fresno, California, there's always been racist against natives, and it's always been an ongoing war, with the Indians and the government there, and this is just an opportunity to, kill another Indian in a different way. The truth. That's what basically has kept me going. Regardless of what people have said, I knew the truth of this. And the truth is, I'm innocent.
Monsi, I'm not sure if it's just me, but I can't hear you.
Oh, my bad, I was on mute. But so that was the trailer to the documentary that's going to be coming out on Douglas Chief Stankiewicz, as you've seen. Now we're going to transition to the next part of our event, where we'll have Chief's legal team tell us more about Chief's story, who he is, as well as his case. Then our panelists, Tony Sarah, as well as Alyssa Biracle, will have a discussion with us about wrongful conviction and injustices in the legal system. I'd love to introduce Curtis Briggs and Alexandra Koch, who are part of Chief's legal team, to talk about Chief's case. So I'll turn it over to both of you.
Thank you, Monty. I appreciate it. Appreciate everybody being here today. We're fighting for a man. We're fighting for a man who's 62 years old, who was wrongfully convicted. A man who has spent over 15,695 days in the dark gray walls of San Quentin, sometimes going months without a sliver or ray of sunlight on his skin. A man whose light has shined through all of that darkness. We're also fighting for a young man that was thrust into the most dangerous environment in the California prison system. A young man who is not a murderer, who was forced to protect himself and defend himself and live with people who truly have murdered people. But this young man we fight for has always maintained hope. We also fight for a teenager, a Native American, who was framed by police when they planted a murder weapon on him. A Native American who so desperately just wanted to be believed by his defense attorney that he punched his defense attorney in court during trial because his defense attorney did not believe he was innocent. We fight for a teenager who was so scared of what was happening to him in that courtroom that he ran out of the courtroom and out of the courthouse and down the street during his trial while he was handcuffed. And we fight for a young boy. Fight for a young boy that was raised in poverty on a reservation ravaged by alcohol, by parents who were ravaged by alcohol and drugs. We fight for a young boy who was taken from his mom by the state and subjected to abuses that no one should ever have to suffer. We fight for a community. Fight for a community that's still battling their genocide. We fight for a community that's still reeling from colonization. We fight for a community that seldom gets justice in the American courtroom. I met Chief in 2016 after Alexandra called me several times in 2015 and asked if I could help. And the case sounded overwhelming, and I'm no death penalty lawyer, but he was on death row. And so off to death row I went. And for those of you who don't know, ironically, California's death row is at San Quentin, which is in one of the most beautiful settings in California. It overlooks the bay, large cliffs, green grass, beautiful clouds flow in and out throughout the day. And then there's this ugly prison sitting there, all beige, gray. I checked in through security and I started my long walk. And off to my left was this small, boxy building, looks like a small mobile home. That is the building where they put people to death. And that's in fact the building where Chief was 3 times saved from death when he was granted last-minute stays of execution. I passed that building and I went in through several security doors, one at a time. And I looked down this row with cells on each side, and these cells were our visiting rooms. And I saw one hardened person after another. I saw people with multiple teardrops down their face for the people that they've killed. I saw people who would not smile, and these people looked through me, not at me, until I saw Chief. And when I saw Chief, I did not know that that was the beginning of a brotherhood. And he stood up. He's a big, robust man with long, flowing native hair. And just the way he talked, I didn't think there was anything to disbelieve. He told me he was innocent. And he said one thing that I thought was a little strange that I didn't think he had accurately stated or that he accurately understood because it sounded preposterous. But he said, Curtis, I've had 18 defense attorneys appointed by the state, and not one of them has ever went to Fresno and checked the evidence. If you could just do that for me, it will show you I'm innocent. As a young attorney, I thought, well, this should be easy. I believe him. But I don't think I understood the magnitude of it. As I left that prison, I decided I would need to put together a pro bono legal team. And so I asked some people who had a lot of experience with death penalty law in California, and every one of them had already known Chief from letters or interactions or from him asking for help. And 2 or 3 people said, "You're going to represent Douglas Stankiewicz? He's crazy." I said, "I don't think he's crazy. I just went and talked to him. He made perfect sense. He seems perfectly reasonable. I believed what he said." Not only that, he says, all I have to do is look at the evidence. I mean, we should know if he's telling the truth fairly quickly if I just go down to Fresno and look at the evidence. Nobody would help me. Then I went to my mentor, Tony. He'll tell you all about that later. Of course, Tony jumped at the chance. Told Tony I believed Douglas was innocent. I believed everything he said. Tony was fully on board, and that's when we started. Shortly thereafter, Alexander and I and other members of our team stood in the Fresno County government building looking at this evidence. As we walked in, we noticed a district attorney's investigator who was escorting us, who was very, very uncomfortable and awkward with us being there. We quickly figured out why. It did not take any kind of legal might or high-level analytical skills to see that the evidence on the table was fabricated. Things like shell casings being the wrong size, the difference between a dime and the size of a penny, if you're not familiar with shell casings. Things were mislabeled. Everything was wrong. And I looked at this holster that the gun was supposedly found in Douglas's possession, and it had these initials engraved in it in a year. And the initials were the lead homicide detective's initials, and the year was 1973, which was 5 years before the murder. And at that point, I knew at least the holster was in the homicide detective's custody 5 years before the murder. Alexander later found the shell casing report, and now we've established that this gun was planted. Chief has always been upfront with me. He's always been a principled person. He has a great smile. He has a great sense of humor. But he believes in what's right. And that's what's kept him going. I like to tell a quick story about Chief's commitment to principles and his willingness to flip his finger at authority when authority is wrong. And that's when Chief went to prison. He had long native hair, and at that time they could discriminate and put you in solitary confinement for that. This led Chief's unwillingness to cut his hair led to Chief being put in solitary confinement for over 17 years. When the law changed and they could no longer have him in solitary confinement for having that long native hair, Chief walked out, and his first day in the yard, he shaved it, just to let them know you can't take his dignity. It is an honor. It is the biggest honor to fight for a man who's wrongfully convicted. There is no more noble cause for a criminal defense attorney or a legal team than to spend a lot of our waking hours trying to get Chief free. But we are not the most powerful people in the equation. But neither are the judges, neither are jurors, but the community. The community can make the difference. And that's why we're here tonight. We're here tonight because you have chosen to spend your time and invest some of your life in learning Chief's story. We greatly appreciate that. On behalf of all of us, and Chief, thank you so much. Right now, I'd like to introduce the foundational member, I just can't give Alexandra enough credit for everything she's done over the last 5 years to keep us going. We call it herding cats, but that's downplaying her importance and significance on this team. So I'm going to turn it over to her.
Thank you, Curtis. It's been such a gift to work with everyone on the legal team and to work on Chief's case. And at the end of my remarks here, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Hearing everyone talk, it's so emotional for me to think about someone being locked up for 43 years for something that they didn't do, and all that Chief has suffered through, during this time. So I thought it would be good if I shared some writing from Chief, and then I will intersperse a couple comments from myself, but I'll tell you when I do that so you know. So starting out from Chief. First and foremost, I hope and pray this epistle has found all of you in great health, and that life is truly blessing you with pure joy and happiness, and that you are all corona-free. I just had to personally say, Roxana, Kaylin, and Monsi, that I truly do thank you and all the others who have supported me and assisted in my present struggle for freedom and justice. I cannot find the exact words to thank you all enough, but I want you to know I am truly grateful for all you have and are doing for me. Just knowing that there are people like you who really care made me feel really good, and just having people like yourself assisting me and my legal team. I know now that I am not alone, and knowing this fact is a wonderful feeling. I want to thank you for your time and concern in my case, and in hopes you will continue to share my voice as I only speak innocently. I am especially grateful because throughout my life, I have been disconnected from the world, disconnected from my tribe, disconnected from my family, and even being disconnected from being a normal 5-year-old boy. I was placed in many foster homes that I was always rejected, till at age 7, I was placed in this one foster home of a beautiful, caring, loving lady named Rosamond. This foster mother gave me homeschooling. Then one day she talked to a beautiful and caring teacher and told her of my past and that she wanted to enroll me in public schooling. So this teacher said yes. So I went to her class, and she really done a lot for me. She played such a positive part of my life. Years later, after being arrested and convicted on this case in 1978, soon after, my teacher found me, and her and I began exchanging letters, and for over the last 37 years, we have remained in touch. I am sure that she don't see me as a 62-year-old, but as the little 8-year-old Indian boy she had in her class. But you know what? If this is the way she wants to think and remember me, then it's fine with me, as long as this memory she holds of me makes her happy. It's just fine with me. So now from me. Despite the suffering that he has endured, Chief is a very positive person. He is not bitter. From the start, he asked his lawyers to look at the evidence because he believed that the evidence would prove his innocence. Until our team entered the case, none of his lawyers had ever looked at the evidence. Even when he discovered what lengths the state had gone to frame him, which still continue to this day, he does not blame all the people involved in keeping him incarcerated for over 43 years. The recent habeas filed initially on October 2nd of last year is the best representation of his case. To quote Chief, "The habeas is not only a clear picture of my wishes and desires, but this habeas is something that clearly reflects and elucidates not only that I was framed, but worse, this habeas lays out a non-refutable and profound story of the wrongs and illegal tactics that was used to ascertain a conviction. It clearly shows that the wrongdoing and illegal acts against me were crimes. I can honestly say that this habeas is truly my voice and my side of the story. I honestly can say that I found it easy to continue to fight as hard as I have for over 42 years because the mere fact that I knew and know that I am innocent, and because of this fact, I knew that I could and would never give up nor stop fighting. Fighting to not only prove that I am innocent, but also to show and prove that I was framed. One can never give up or stop fighting when one knows the truth. And even though I have paid an unwarranted price of 42 plus years, I am grateful for the legal team that I now have, as they have believed in me and have gave my side of the story, as well as making sure that my voice is heard. All I can say and see coming out of the contents in the habeas is justice and freedom. And again, from me, over the years that I've been working on this case, some people have asked me why I have persevered. Recent events, including the Derek Chauvin trial, helped me articulate my reasons. The prosecutors for the state of Minnesota said that they felt it was a moral moment, given that all that they benefited from living in this country, they had an obligation to volunteer to represent the state. When I became a lawyer, I took an oath to uphold the Constitution. So I similarly feel that I have an obligation to give my time and knowledge to help someone without resources whose constitutional rights have been violated time and time again over many decades. What is different about our situation with Chief is that unlike the Chauvin prosecutors, we don't have the backing of law firms, nor the power of the state's resources to assist us. That is why I hope you, in whatever way you can, will assist us in seeing Chief through to freedom and justice.
Thank you so much for sharing Chief's moving letter and helping us understand the injustices leading up to his wrongful conviction. Now that, as our audience knows more about Chief's story, I would like to share some resources that you can help through, which is donating through our Venmo or by buying some merch that we designed that will help publicize Chief's case as well as raise money for his case. We will now transition to having a conversation about wrongful conviction with our panelists. We have Tony Serra, a criminal defense lawyer who's representing Chief, as well as Alyssa Bierkel, litigation coordinator and attorney with the California Innocence Project. So let me have them a second. All right. So we'd love to start off by hearing about both of our panelists' careers as well as just hearing about you. Tony, do you want to start off telling us a little bit about yourself as well as your career?
I will be abbreviated. I am going on being 87 this year, and therefore I've had a long and varied career. I'm known as a jury trial specialist. I have a reputation for doing back-to-back jury trials. I have had probably more jury trials than the vast majority of attorneys. I was once called and accept the honor that I am the best pro bono lawyer around. Early in my career, I took an informal vow of poverty that I would never, how would I say it, earn money through the practice of law beyond the necessities of I'll take a pro bono case and I'll put money into the case. There's no such thing as just a pure pro bono. You put in your own money. So I need, some fee for that, and I need costs and cases. But beyond that, I have nothing. That is, I'm a non-materialistic type person. I'm more ideological. I desire always cases that are fraught with political, social, economic consequences. I go after from the earliest time, more, apropos now, but I go after the dirty cop. I go after the perjurious snitch. Those are, my specialties. That's my forte. I'm known to be very avid, aggressive, confrontational cross-examiner. I'm known for, passionate closing arguments. I'm known to stand up and take contempt from courts, for speaking beyond what they want. I've been gagged in a number of cases. So I'm what they call an old-fashioned radical lawyer who emphasizes, pro bono cases for deserving defendants. Obviously, this case here, Chief's case, fits into that category well.
Thanks for sharing that with us, Tony. Alyssa, now can we hear about your career as well as a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in a tiny town in Northern California called Truckee, California, and made my way down the coast, graduated from UCSB, and then went to law school in San Diego, where I went to California Western School of Law, and it was there that I learned about the California Innocence Project. I kind of was oblivious to the whole thing. I honestly, lived a pretty sheltered life and was really naive to the fact that innocent people even went to prison. I'm sure that's part of my upbringing in a tiny mountain town. But, you'd see the occasional Dateline or 2020 episode about it, but in my mind, those things were always kind of just an anomaly. And that kind of changed when I got involved as a law student with the California Innocence Project in 2006. And that's when I realized, these wrongful convictions are not an anomaly at all. The corruption in the legal system is actually much more prevalent than I had ever imagined. And the way that I learned about the California Innocence Project is they had an informational session that I attended, and I was just blown away. And it's one of those moments in your life where I can point to a single day that changed the entire trajectory of my life. And it was that day that I went to that informational session. Had I not gone and showed up to that, I would have been on a completely different trajectory right now. So for anyone out there, just get involved and attend a lot of stuff, and something, might really strike your fancy. And the next thing you know, you're on a path that you would never look back from. And I didn't. So I graduated from law school in 2008, and I was immediately hired on as one of the lawyers there. At the time, we were very small. We only had about 3 lawyers. We're up to 10 now. So we've grown quite a bit. And I am now the litigation coordinator of the project, which means that I coordinate all the active case litigation. We've obviously have a lot more cases going on with more lawyers working on it. Manage the case intake process. We get anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 requests for help with innocence cases a year. So it's quite a lot of intake that's happening. I also serve as an in-house DNA expert because, talking about pro bono work and you don't have a lot of money to do anything. And our project, is also funded by grants and donations and stuff, that it got very costly to try to consult DNA experts in cases. So, my boss gave me the blessing to go ahead and, get up to date on DNA. And so now I am serving as an in-house DNA expert, and I actually serve on the National Innocence Network Complex DNA Working Group as well for that. I do a lot of drafting and filing of DNA motions, and then the petitions, the habeas petitions with the really fancy, Latin word for it's basically a petition to let me out of prison. But I author a lot of those. I direct and supervise clinical casework. I teach courses on wrongful convictions, and I'm also involved in policy work to try to get laws changed to either prevent wrongful convictions on the front end or rectify them on the back end. And in my career, I've had the pleasure of being either associate counsel or lead counsel in 8 exonerations, and I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. I'm just going to keep going ahead. And this type of, nonprofit work is, I highly recommend it. I highly recommend getting involved in something where you can actually give back to an individual, give back to a community, because there's just nothing more rewarding than that.
Yeah, thank you both for sharing the work that you do, Tony and Alyssa. For our next question, it's going to be geared towards Alyssa. For people who aren't familiar with wrongful convictions, how would you explain what wrongful conviction is?
Yeah, so, like I was saying earlier, like I really was oblivious to what a wrongful conviction even was when I was a baby law student and a baby lawyer and stuff. But it's it's the concept that's what I'm focusing on. There's two categories of wrongful convictions. There's wrongful convictions that happen where somebody has committed the crime, but something went south in the trial. Maybe they had a bad lawyer, maybe they had a bad prosecutor, maybe the ultimate crimes and convictions weren't fair for that individual. That is a type of wrongful conviction. The other category of wrongful convictions are innocence cases. And these are people who either, one, no crime was ever committed. And that happens, we've seen that in cases where somebody says that they were raped and a rape never occurred. So there's cases where crimes never happen at all. Or there's cases where crimes happen, but somebody else did it and the wrong person is in prison. So those are kind of the two broad categories of wrongful convictions that we're looking at.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation on telling us more about these two different categories of wrongful conviction. Our next question is for Tony. How do you choose to represent how do you choose which clients to represent? And how did you become a part of Chief's legal team?
The way I select the cases that I will do pro bono is whether or not they have political, social, economic, I don't know, manifestations, conditions, next, whether or not, like in Chief's case, there is a factual basis to believe that there's been wrongful conviction, or a faulty conviction here on fabricated evidence at one point. And at this stage, I'm requested very, very frequently to take a pro bono case, but not, I have to decline so many that it's hurtful. And I usually say it's just not the kind of pro bono case that I take. And that would be the routine, dare I use that word, type of usually a murder conviction. It has to have something more to it, like the Chief's case, where we have a Native American and we have issues of racism, and we have issues of police misconduct. We have issues of coerced testimony. I'm talking about Billy Brown. So those are sort of the criteria that I use. Secondly, how I got involved in this case is I wasn't contacted until I was asked. I didn't know the chief, and he didn't contact me. But Curtis Briggs, a young and you saw passionate, eloquent, political-minded lawyer, he was in it. And he, because of his youth, not his ability, not his skills, they're way up there, but because of his youth and no experience with death penalty cases, he wasn't qualified to do it on his own. So he asked me to come in. And after, learning just a very little bit about it, I agreed. But see, my specialty is trial. It's what I do with passion. It's what I, have done over a lifetime career, and I'm good at it. And so I'm at this point, when I came in, we thought there was going to be a trial. We thought, that at least the second phase would be relitigated. We wanted the first phase also, but that was going to be a legal decision. But I was anxious to start. My skill would be invaluable. My experience would be, meaningful. But that didn't happen. What occurred is, they dropped the death penalty and gave him life without. So I'm not an appellate lawyer. So at this juncture, I'm kind of an aide to camp. I'm a fifth wheel. I'm standing by, ready to go. If there's a hearing that's evidentiary, I'll be there. That's my pride and that's my passion, is examining people, cross-examining people, a trial strategy, what kind of witnesses should be, treated in what way. So I came aboard because I was asked. I have met, on numerous occasions, the chief. I reiterate everything that has been said about him in terms of his, how would you call it? His demeanor is, so affable. He's so, you meet him and you respect him immediately. You expect, his endurance, and you respect his, how would you call it? The fidelity to his Indian ancestry. You respect the fact that he will never stop, fighting the case. So I joined the team in my admiration of our client.
Thank you so much for telling us about that.
Sorry, I have to interject one thing, because Tony, even though we haven't had a trial, is invaluable when it comes to all kinds of strategies. So I just don't want to let that go by.
Yeah, definitely. This next question is going to be for Alyssa. Regarding the Innocence Project, how does the Innocence Project decide which cases to consider and take on versus which ones to not take?
Yeah, sure. So one thing that a lot of people don't know is that the different innocence projects across the nation are actually independently run, independently funded, and they actually have kind of independent criteria about what types of cases they will take. So, for example, there's some projects that will only take cases that have a DNA component to it. If your case doesn't have a DNA component, which usually is, it's either a rape or a murder case, that project's just not gonna take it on. There's some cases that strictly deal with forensic science issues, like bad sciences, like shaken baby cases or arson cases. Our particular project, and we handle convictions that are in Southern California, so basically from Kern County and down, we take any type of case. We are a big enough innocence project with the number of lawyers that we have that we're able to expand our work to include any types of cases. So what the way that in which we decide to take a case is actually a very long process that can take over a decade to happen. We get so many requests for assistance a year, and so at the very initial stage, we can weed out a lot of applicants just because they're not claiming innocence, but they're claiming, oh, my sentence was too long, or something that's kind of non-innocence related, and we can weed out a lot of cases that way, almost half of them, I'd say. And then for the cases that make it past that initial point, what we will do is collect legal documents, just kind of some minimum legal documents, appellate documents. And then we actually farm those cases out to big law firms to draft memos for us on the case. So what is this person's claim of innocence? What were they convicted of? And then those memos come back into the lawyers at the Innocence Project. We review them and we decide whether or not we think the case should go on to further investigation. So that's another big kind of funneling process. Then when the case goes on to further investigation, it's assigned to a law student who is trained how to investigate cases. And the investigation might be something very minimal, like talk to the co-defendant in this case. Or the investigation might be something that's a really, really big project. Get DNA testing on this case, talk to all these witnesses, consult with experts on these various issues. And so we have kind of a broad spectrum of cases that make it to the investigation stage. And then I'd say from that, maybe one case a year, we would actually come to the conclusion that somebody is likely innocent. And we would have a big presentation on it. Usually in those cases too, we even approach the prosecutor's office who handled the case to try to get them interested, involved, and wanting to do something about it. Now that a lot of prosecutors' offices have these conviction review units, which is kind of like their innocence project within a DA's office. So it's a long process, and so it's a complex answer for how do we decide which cases to take on, and it's a long answer, but there is a lot of thought that goes into it.
It was really interesting to hear how both of you have different ways of selecting which cases you work on. Tony's method is very different with Chief's case as well as other cases that he's taken on in comparison to Alyssa's. But with Alyssa and the Innocence Project as well as Tony, both do nonprofit work or pro bono work, yet the goal is still the same, helping people who are wrongly convicted or have those cases that meet the qualifications that your group has. For our next question we have for both of you, throughout your careers, in what ways have you seen unequal treatment and blatant discrimination of minority groups by the legal system? Tony, would you like to go first with this question?
Yes, I think that, since the Black Lives Matter movement has started, we have seen the great disparity in how minorities are treated, contrasted to how white majority is treated. Sadly, death penalty falls dominantly on persons of color, persons with mental deficiencies, persons who are poor, impoverished. And, it surprises no one that currently there's a manifestation of there's two levels of law, one applicable to the minority and another applicable to the white majority. There's always been that. There's always been racism, throughout my career, and I've been doing this, a longish time. 60 years approximately or more, and just now, people are on the street really demonstrating against that. And the truth of it is that, until we had more of these cameras that are part of your phone where they can, pick up evidence of what is occurring, it was harder to prove the racism, the discrimination against these entities. So it's flagrant. It's always been flagrant. We are a country in our judicial system that sadly has tacitly accepted racism and discrimination. And, trial lawyers see it every day of the week.
Do you want me to jump in?
Yep, go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, okay, yeah, and I absolutely what everything Tony said is spot on. People of color in this nation are disproportionately arrested, charged, and sentenced. And I'm just gonna give you like a couple examples of what just happens kind of at the trial level. Like you can have a crime that could be charged either as a misdemeanor or a felony. If you're white, you're probably gonna get the misdemeanor. If you're a person of color, they're probably gonna charge it as a felony. People of color are charged more frequently with crimes against officers, like resisting arrest. Murder cases are charged more often with special circumstances, meaning that can tack on a lot of extra time to your sentence or make your sentence go from just a murder case to a death penalty case or life without the possibility of parole case. Just, there's just persons of color are more often charged with those special circumstances than white people are. People of color are charged with, in drug cases, we see this a lot happen where there's differences in sentencing involving like powder cocaine versus crack cocaine, where crack cocaine might be used more in communities of color. And so it will actually carry a longer sentence, even though it's essentially the same thing. Death sentences are sought out often for more people of color, especially if the victim is white. So if you have a person of color who has allegedly committed the crime and a white victim, it's almost guaranteed that the person is going to be prosecuted under the death penalty laws. You're less likely as a person of color to get diversion or deferred prosecution. You're less likely to get a plea deal offer. I can actually talk about one of my innocent clients who he was charged with his third strike, and his first strike was him and his buddy had stolen 2 valet cars. And because there were 2 valet employees, that was considered 2 strikes. So a lot of people think like, oh, you get, 1 strike from your first crime, and then you get another strike from your second crime, and then your third crime, you're struck out. That's actually not true. You can get 2 strikes from your first one. And he was Black. And so then he gets arrested for a robbery, and they're charging it as a third strike case, and he's facing 75 years to life. That's like triple the sentence as if someone had killed 3 different people. Like that's what he gets convicted of in this robbery, where the robbers got $400. And it turned out that he was living in Las Vegas at the time, and he had 9 alibi witnesses. And we found out who really did this crime. But had he been a white person, I can guarantee you that he would have not been charged with that degree with the third strike, and he would not have been given a sentence that was so long. And if I can, just real quick, I want to talk just generally about like race and innocence issues too, because we see this a lot. So one of the biggest reasons that there are wrongful convictions are people are wrong about who they identify as committing a crime. And cross-racial identifications are even worse. So if people are of a different race, then there's like a 50% greater chance of misidentification at that time. And then I want to point out that Black exonerees account for almost 50% of the exonerations in the United States, when they're only 13% of the country's population. It's just wild. Your chances of being wrongfully convicted if you're a person of color are like 3 times more likely than your white counterparts. And again, with the sentencing, it's just crazy, but just the studies done on sentencing show that people of color end up with sentences that are 20% longer than people who are white.
Thank you for that. It's honestly very upsetting how persistent these issues are and how they disproportionately affect people of color. And like Tony said, people with mental deficiencies, as well as, being in a place of poverty. Moving from that, what changes do you both believe must occur to prevent these injustices from happening and prevent these wrongful convictions like Chief's from occurring? And, this question's for both of you, so whichever of you wants to go first.
Well, I'll go first and be succinct. What I think is there is a rising tide of public interest in the judicial process where it goes awry, where there's racism, there's demonstrations, based on the Black Lives Matter doctrine around the world. And, people desire change. So it's got to be twofold. First, the revelation of the inequity, and then demonstrations where, the public has a voice and the voice is loud and clear that they want change, they want reform, they want, less racism, no racism. They want to change things. So I think, one, we go to the streets. Two, it's up to the lawyers to point out the inequity, the wrong that's being perpetrated, whatever fashion it is. We do have a constitution, we do have a First Amendment, and I think we have to be loud, clear, vociferous in demanding, reform.
Definitely agree. And I think for me, I kind of compartmentalize it into maybe two categories. One being education, because I think a lot of people are just unaware. I think with the Black Lives Matter movement and everything, that people are becoming aware, and this is really sparking and igniting a lot of a lot of good action. And the same thing with having cell phones recording all of this. We didn't have that before. If somebody complained that, the cops were rough with me, or the cops did this or that, we didn't have the proof of it, and now we have the proof. And so all of that, I think, is part of the education of the public and getting the public outraged and inspired to actually do something. I think the second component for really affecting change is accountability. And we've seen, a real lack of accountability over the years. In fact, the California, our U.S. Supreme Court has essentially said, if a cop or a prosecutor screws up your case, frames you deliberately, hides stuff from you, that they're essentially immune from liability for that. And it's just insane. So but I think that there is a movement towards accountability right now too. So you're seeing this with like the Derek Chauvin thing too, that people they're wanting the accountability, and they're actually imposing accountability for that. And in Chief's case, obviously a lot of things went awry in this, and this is something that somebody needs to be held accountable for what has happened. Otherwise, if you're not held accountable, it's just going to keep happening again and again and again.
It's so important and helpful for us to understand some of the changes that really need to happen in the legal system, as well as just progress that's being made. And really great points from both of you. Tony mentioned how lawyers should address and demand the reform that we need. And Alyssa, you brought up a really great point as well, where a lot of us need to just be aware of it. We need to educate ourselves and educate each other on what injustices are occurring and why that's occurring, and how there's a need and movement for accountability. So these are all really great points, and it's very informative for us to learn about how change can possibly occur to prevent these kinds of injustices.
Can I just add, sorry, one more thing that I don't know if people, we just keep talking, who out there knows about this, but California did just pass the Racial Justice Act. And it was an attempt to try to kind of remedy some of the racial issues that are present in our justice system here in California. So it does this like really interesting thing. It actually allows you to get habeas relief in circumstances where you can show that there's somebody involved in your trial, like an attorney, a judge, law enforcement officer, a witness, or a juror in your case was racially biased against you. You can, and it goes even farther than that. So if there was racially discriminatory language used during your criminal proceedings, that's another round to get you out. If there was racial bias in jury selection, like there was one case where a judge would question Black jurors like 30% longer than white jurors. And so that was an example of like when you might be able to get habeas relief that way. And then this is a really interesting thing, which I think applies to a lot of people. But if you can show that there's statistical disparities in how people of one race are disproportionately charged, convicted, or sentenced, you can get relief that way. And the act actually gives you the mechanism to say, hey, prosecutor's office, I want you to tell me like how many white people were convicted of this identical crime and had the same background as my guy. And I want to tell you, and I want to compare that to what my guy actually got. And so if you can prove that there's disparities in how two different races are treated within a prosecutor's office, then you can actually get some sort of relief through the courts that way now.
May I add something? I know I'm not supposed to talk right now, but having worked on this case for all these years, I believe also that we really need kind of two fundamental changes. One is that when someone is convicted, every prosecutor's office should have a conviction integrity unit. I mean, these convictions really need to be looked at from the beginning and say, is there evidence that supports this conviction or not? I think that's one thing that really needs to happen. And then I think also that when it comes to the whole death penalty system, which I have learned an inordinate amount about over these years, that needs to be structurally changed, because right now the whole system is focused on showing that someone is mentally retarded so that they can't be executed. There is not the money. So in preparing this habeas, for example, we had to do this totally on our own. There's no state money available to do a habeas, even if you've got proof that the person was framed. Because the whole system now is based on, you get the death penalty. The only way to get out of the death penalty from the lawyer's perspective and the legal system is to say that the person has a mental defect or they're mentally retarded. And so I think that also really needs to be changed.
Yeah, everyone has brought up some really great points. Alyssa, thanks for updating us on the act. And Alexandra, thanks for telling us about the injustices when it comes to death penalty. Now, to transition to our last question, part of the Q&A, and I'd like to open this up to the legal team as well. But what obstacles have you and your team faced in getting Chief to be freed? So anyone can go ahead and chime in.
I have some contributions. Everyone might be surprised. It's almost impossible to get a court date. If we want to get Chief out, we have to get into the physical courtroom, have a judge, a prosecutor that replies to whatever paperwork we file, and a judge that's going to listen to the argument. Now, we've known this evidence was planted since 2017, and we've had a pretty good understanding of, there's a lot of misconduct we're not talking about that is all exonerating. We've had a pretty good understanding about that. We've never been able to get the judge to listen to us. And what I mean is that judge in Fresno keeps saying, well, that's not what the case is in my courtroom for today. So you're going to have to come back in 6 months and figure it out. Then when we go back in 6 months, that's not what my case is in this court. It's not what this case is in the courtroom for today. So you're going to have to come back some other time. And then somebody had to file an appeal. Another member of the legal team had to file an appeal to get the judge just hopefully to acknowledge that we can make certain arguments in the courtroom. And, that process has taken like a year or two. And there's no court date in sight, even though that we've moved as fast as we can. So it's actually like logistically and physically almost insurmountable. And here when Chief was sick with COVID and his life was in danger, like we could go nowhere. We went to the governor, couldn't hear from them. We went to the attorney general, didn't hear from them. We can't get the judge to move anything up. So it's really a frustrating process as far as, it's one thing to say he was framed. It's a whole nother process just to get the chance to make the argument in court.
One of the other obstacles that we have faced, as I alluded to a couple minutes ago, is resources. So, we have all worked pro bono on this case for multiple years. We've all put on our own money because we've needed to hire investigators and expert witnesses and so on. And so that really slows the process down a lot. Because when someone's getting paid, then they can, put all their focus and attention on it. And when they're not, and they have to support themselves otherwise and use their free time to work on this, that really slows things down a lot.
Thank you for your responses. Now for the remaining time, we'll be taking audience questions, which can be for any one of us up here. So please feel free to put them in the Q&A box at the bottom, and we'll get to as many questions as possible. Um, so here's one. What's the biggest change you think should be made in the legal system to prevent these kinds of situations from happening again? And anyone could take a crack at that.
I think that that's a. I don't think that there is something you could just label as what should be the biggest change made in the legal system, because there's so many sides to the legal system, and so many factors that go into a wrongful conviction. You might have a wrongful conviction that's based on somebody who lied, and you might have a how do you prevent that? That's gonna be tricky. You might have a bad identification case. There's things that you can do to kind of lessen the odds of a wrongful conviction happening. Like, for example, in eyewitness identification cases, we've recently passed some legislation that requires the cops to record what the witness is saying at the time of the identification. So they can't later say, oh, he immediately picked out photo number 1. Now we actually have a process for recording what the witness actually said. Confessions weren't required to be recorded for a really long time. And so you would end up with a cop saying, oh yeah, he confessed to me in his police interrogation. Your client saying, no, I didn't. And you have no proof one way or the other. Now confessions are required to be recorded. So there's a lot of things that can hopefully help prevent these wrongful convictions, but wrongful convictions kind of come in all types of shapes and forms. So I'm not sure that there's kind of one thing that could solve everything.
I think one thing that is relevant to this case where reform would help is that there's some form of sanction, punishment, even prosecution of police officers who plant evidence, who coerce false testimony. We had that with Billy Brown here. When he recanted, he said that they forced him, they told him what to say, and it wasn't true. So there has to be some way to punish that. And that's would deter it potentially in the future. So if there's misconduct, go after the officers. We need to have someone who oversees the integrity of the process and look closely at the conduct of the police in the manner in which they acquire evidence, in the manner in which they present it.
Yeah.
Well, and along those same lines, I think, and there's more discussion about this now, but I think one thing we need is to change immunity. Right now, the officers and the prosecutors have immunity. So, and the, number of prosecutors that have been disciplined in any way, I think is like 1 or 2, in the last 20, 30 years, whatever it is. So, so for them, there's no concern about having financial responsibility for their actions. And I think that's one thing that really needs to change.
Yeah, I definitely agree. This question we've gotten a couple times. Are there other ways for us to get involved, and are there other ways for students to get involved with this case, in addition to donating? And this is for the legal team.
I think that there's an opportunity. You're seeing a moving target, and although we're probably all presenting well tonight, we're pretty understaffed and overworked on this case. I think that we're at a time when we can start a community organizing campaign and letter writing to legislatures and to Rob Bonta and to the Fresno County District Attorney's Office. And it's time to start that type of organizing, but none of us up here have the capacity to do anything other than maybe advise or guide on it. So, or kind of add guidance to it. So if somebody, especially students, which are amazing for us, because there's a tradition of people being exonerated from student-led efforts. If you want to start to put together some type of letter writing campaign or public relations campaign, we would definitely appreciate that.
No, and it should go to the governor also, the material, because pending before him is application for pardon, and all the support we can muster for that could be very meaningful. This governor, is under fire, but he has done a lot of real radical good change before this terrible recall election process was started.
Additionally, if there are students or more people that want to get involved, you can contact me and I'll put my email in the chat, and we can go from there and see what we can do. For one question, how can I get information on the history of Chief's case from the start? We actually have a website set up, justiceforchief.org. And if Monty can type that into the chat, it tells a lot about the case, and more than just what we've been talking about. It talks about a lot of the evidence, the recanted state declaration from Billy Brown, in which he says that the prosecutor trained him and threatened him with homicide charges if he didn't lie on the stand and say he saw Chief shoot the gun. And there's the legal teams here. There's so much about this case that you can just tell that wrongful conviction is what occurred, and a lot of injustice is what occurred. But hopefully that answers your question.
There's also the opportunity to review the habeas petition. The habeas petition, I think it's, Alexandra will tell us, it's over 1,000 pages with exhibits, but I think the motion itself is about 250 pages. And that's probably the best summarization of the case from start to finish.
Well, and if you want to know the history, there's an introduction in the habeas that really spells out a lot of what happened, which is intended for an audience that doesn't know the history of the case at all. So there's that, and the habeas is 219 pages long, and then also on the website are all of the exhibits that are referenced in the habeas. They're in a different section, but where it'll say declaration of Gary Snow, Detective Gary Snow, in the habeas, you'll find it under the number that we've noted in the exhibits. And the exhibits actually are about 3,400 pages long. So, and most of the exhibits are from law enforcement. So, we have a few that we've gotten elsewhere, but our case is proven largely from their own documents showing, what they did and basically what they've gotten away with for 43 years now.
Mm-hmm. There's one person that has a specific case. They know someone who's serving life for a murder they didn't do. And they gave this person 25 years for a murder weapon that was never recovered. And this is most likely going towards Alyssa. How common is that?
Here's the thing: if the person was murdered, I would need more facts, but if someone was murdered with a firearm, you wouldn't necessarily have to recover the firearm to also tack on an extra 25 years to a life sentence already for having fired a firearm, right? Because if the person has a bullet in them, then they died via a gun, and we see that very, very often. A lot of times, but again, there is a lot of racial disparity in this. A white person firing a gun and killing someone, 25 to life. A person of color, 50 to life. Tack on the gun allegation to it. So we do see that it's very common.
All right, and if you still have questions, please put them in. A little similar one, can you go to the media and the public to put pressure on wrongful convictions like Chief's? and like kind of like the ways to pressure people through the media and through the public.
The media is an extremely powerful tool. The problem is that unless the media wants to publish on your topic, they won't. So we've been blessed in some ways to have some local coverage, to have some, 5, 10 years ago, some stuff in the San Francisco Chronicle. And we're really fortunate to have a documentary crew really taking a really good look at this. And we do expect really good results from that documentary as far as getting Chief's story out there. The media, to me, is the single biggest powerful tool we have, but it's hard to harness. What we were experiencing a couple years ago, about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, well, when we got Chief, it was a fantastic victory to get Chief's death sentence taken away, and it converted to life without possibility of parole, because it showed the fundamental weakness in the case against him, and that was a concession. But at that time, most of the journalists just didn't feel it was popular, or that basically it would sell. It wasn't a hot topic, and so if you know anybody that wants to write, the Davis Vanguard did an amazing job for us. I mean, that was critical to get them to do a really in-depth kind of expose and presentation of the evidence. And that helped us, that gave us so much momentum to get into the mainstream media. Maybe somebody out there can help us or have some contacts. We would love to do that. We would love to get Chief's story out there. We believe this is Chief's story is an ideological victory against the death penalty nationwide. Alyssa mentioned a couple things. A lot of people don't know that the 3 strikes law was authored by a judge, partially authored by a judge named James Ardice. And if you trace James Ardice back to day one of his career as a prosecutor, he was the prosecutor that set Chief up and framed him. So there is an ideological victory at stake that if we could just cinch it down and seize the moment, that we would have a great win, and we need the media to do that.
Yeah, thank you. Here's one question, and this could be for everyone. How do you stay motivated in the face of all of these built-in obstacles? So I'm guessing that's in trying to prove someone that's wrongfully convicted, trying to prove that they're innocent. How do you all stay motivated?
I figured if we don't do it, then who's gonna do it? That's the thing, I think, being one of these pro bono lawyers is like it's just who you are, it's what you do, and you just keep going one foot in front of the other and try this. If it doesn't work, you're gonna try that. If the courts don't work, you try the governor. If the governor doesn't work, you try the media. If media doesn't work, you try the parole board. You try everything you possibly can. But I think a lot of people who get involved in this work have just the inner spirit of never giving up. And so I mean, I can tell that just, from Curtis and Tony and Alexandra, like these are the type of individuals who are just going to keep going.
Well, and I still remember going to visit Chief after they dropped the death penalty and talking to some of the other death penalty lawyers who were there meeting with other clients. And I had seen them at the vending machines over the, years. So we had some familiarity with each other. And they said, well, is the legal team satisfied with getting him down to LWOP? And I'm like, no, because we know he's innocent. So no, we are not okay with, keeping him locked up for the rest of his life. So, I think his innocence and his perseverance, I mean, he has been through so much, and if it weren't for him, we would never have been able to figure out all the things we did with the habeas. I mean, he poured through all the reports, he searched his memory. I mean, I think it's probably partly the, him and his personality and the fact that he's innocent.
I think that there's an adage that, death penalty practitioners are the holy persons of the legal field. They will follow a case for 20, 30, 40 years sometimes. filing, writs and habeases just to keep that person alive. So it is considered not, a vocation, it is considered a calling. It is something that is very respected by all of the facets of practicing attorneys.
I also think that this is a value-driven job. If it's in your value system to fight for these clients that have been wrongfully accused, or we, Tony and I, fight for clients who are rightfully accused just as hard at certain times. And um, the question is not how you stay motivated. The question is how you don't destroy yourself by being so motivated that you devote your entire emotional energy and resources to the cause. That's the harder balance for me. But I do get a lot of motivation from, every time I listen to Tony, or I listen to Alyssa speak about the same issues that I've experienced, the same issues we have in Chief's case, I get fired up. And Alexander and I talk, a lot. We keep each other going and keep each other motivated. And we certainly go through a lot of difficult times where we run out of energy. And this is just one tragedy we're dealing with. We also have our own personal lives, and things get very, very difficult and tricky. So it's a great question. It's hard to stay motivated and healthy, in my opinion, and that's where the work is at.
Yeah, thank you all for your responses. That's all the time we have for audience questions. Thank you to everyone who asks. And it was great hearing what all of our speakers had to say in response.
So now to wrap up tonight, if the legal team, Alexandra, if you would like to say a few words to wrap up the night, if there's a final message you would like to say about Chief's case, you have the stage for a couple minutes.
Well, it is noted on the website, but it might not be easy to see. But the status of Chief's case currently is twofold. The first is that his LWOP sentence is on appeal to the 5th District Court of Appeal. He has an appointed lawyer for that, Elizabeth Campbell. Appointed lawyer means that person's paid by the state. So, who is doing an excellent job. And she just filed her reply brief, which is the third brief. So there's the appellate's opening brief, which was on behalf of Chief. And then second was the Attorney General's response. And then third is the reply. So I don't know how soon it will happen, but there's supposed to be oral argument on that. And we will post that on the website when we know, because you can watch that live online. So that's one. And the Attorney General conceded some points in that. One, that the judge should have exercised his discretion in reviewing a sentence and let us present information on an alternative sentence, which he did not do. So that's one. The second one is that we filed the habeas in Fresno Superior Court at the end of January, and the judge has given himself until May 14th to rule on it. Now, this judge has, delayed things many times. So whether he will actually rule on it May 14th is anybody's guess. But so that's the other thing that is in the works right now. And then I just want to echo what Curtis and Tony said, and that is that if people are willing to write letters to the governor, to the new Attorney General, etc., and I have some other people in mind to write letters to as well, to ask them to write to the governor, like the new Interior Secretary, who's Native American, then if you get in touch with Roxana, then we would love to, give you a draft letter to use, and so on and so forth. So that would be very helpful. And I want to thank everyone for attending. Thank you for all of your support. And we will be relaying that to Chief. He was very excited that this is happening today. He's very excited that the website is up. and he's very hopeful and encouraged.
So that's a wrap for tonight's event. Thank you to everybody who came in our audience. We had a pretty big audience, so I'm really excited that a lot of people are interested in learning about wrongful conviction as well as hearing about Chief's case. I want to thank our panelists as well as the legal team for all of your time. Thank you to Alyssa, Tony, Alexandra, Curtis. We really appreciate hearing you all tonight as well as learning so much from you about wrongful conviction and Chief's case. Just to give a final little plug, feel free to donate to our Venmo at Justice Chief, which is above over here, as well as it is in the chat. Feel free to also buy some merch that we've made. There is sweatshirts, hoodies, t-shirts that are designs that say justiceforchief.org. So it serves as a way for you to donate money as well as to help publicize Chief's case and get that case known. Also check out the website, justiceforchief.org, for more resources to learn more about Chief's case. And if you're interested in helping out for Chief's case or learning more about it, we have shared contact information of Roxana. Curtis has shared his contact information, and there's also contact information on the website. So there's many ways for you to get involved. Thank you all tonight, and have a great night. Take care. Thank you so much.